So welcome back. We're looking forward, Be'ez Hashem, to continue and hopefully to conclude this Igeres HaKodesh Yud Beis, this 11th Holy Epistle of the Alter Rebbe. We had quite a few classes on this Igeres. It could be this the 7th or the 8th, that matters. A bit lengthy, but it was worthwhile to invest the time to try to present, B'chazdei Hashem, the profound and deep and exciting even message of the Alter Rebbe in this Igeres Yud Beis, in this 12th letter. So we're holding on Ach, in page 236, that is, Ach. Excuse me, Ach tzedakah, which it's just under the half of the page. This is, of course, in the original text. Just under the half a page, there's a period there, which is Olam Hazeh, the abbreviation of Olam Hazeh, Achat Tzedakah b'Pchinas Avodah. However, Tzedakah on the level of Avodah. Now, if you are following, the Alter Rebbe began this Igeres with the pasuk in Yeshayahu, V'haya Ma'aseh Tzedakah Sholem, V'Avodah Tzedakah Hashkit V'Betach Hadolim. The action of Tzedakah brings peace, and the service of tzedakah brings common tranquility for eternity. And the Alter Rebbe asked the question, what's the difference of Ma'aseh tzedakah, Avodas tzedakah? Apparently tzedakah is tzedakah. We even added, you could look at the Alter Rebbe's question even deeper, in a deeper level. So on the surface, of course, the Alter Rebbe asks, why is the pasuk differentiating between action of tzedakah, Avodas tzedakah? On the surface is the same, but if you go really deeper a bit, the mitzvah of tzedakah always comes along with avodah, with submission, with service. We spoke about this a bit at length last week or 2 weeks ago. Distinct in any other mitzvah, you notice people are very careful in other mitzvahs. When it comes to tzedakah, it's a total different thing. Conversely, you find people who excel precisely in this mitzvah, maybe even more than other mitzvahs, because they understand it's a perspective that what Hashem gave me. It's really, He gave me more in order to share with others. Like David HaMelech said, Mishalchana sanulach. Whatever I'm giving, taking from you and giving it back to you, because if you gave me more than the average, why did you give it to me? And then there's people who they have a need. So you gave it to me in order to share, which again, it's perspective, and especially, and if Hashem gives a person, grand wealth, he understands right away that I'm an ambassador. I was chosen from on high to be ambassador to extend tzedakah individual to institutions, in other words, this which contribute to Torah, mitzvahs, education, and so on. But of course, the generic classic idea of tzedakah, simply someone's in need. They need help physically for their physical being, and rather physical needs, for their physical well-being, that is, and I have an excess amount of money. I understand that Hashem gave it to me in order to share. So that itself is a person putting things in perspective, and not to think, things just happen arbitrarily, randomly. I got a lot of money, I was wise, and I was talented, and I invested my time and money, and here I am, and Baruch Hashem, a success story. No, many people do the same, and exactly the same, maybe even better, and not necessarily, as we all know, does it work exactly that way. And if I did, Hashem gave me the bracha. Well, He gave me the bracha because He wanted me to be able to share with others, to be charitable with others. So that itself is a certain shtel, it's a certain stand, it's a certain posture and way of thinking, that what Hashem gives me, it's not all for me, and I'm here to share. So again, that's why tzedakah is always something special. If I establish it psychologically, and able to establish this emotionally, that my excess money is there not only for myself but to extend to others, but also, it's not, especially someone doesn't have that exact perspective or doesn't live with that exact perspective. It didn't enter, didn't penetrate, it didn't become part of who he or she is. Then, of course, it's an avodah, because it's the money that I earn, that I have to give it away. Like I said before, there's people who are careful in many other areas. Tzedakah is a total different idea. I have to extend myself. There's a action, a manifestation, an expression, rather, of compelling myself, coercing myself even. It's money which belongs to me and I'm giving it away. I'm giving part of myself away because this is money that I put in, as the Alter Rebbe has in Perek Lamed Zayin in Likutei Amorim. We'll mention in a moment, or quickly mention, Igeres HaKodesh. We did have, it's important to note, that we did have a whole presentation in the beginning of Igeres 10. This is the fourth segment of Tanya. Tanya is all 5 segments. We mentioned also the 5 segments. There's precision to that as well. This is the Torah Shebiksav of Torah Chassidus, the written Torah of Torah Chassidus. We know in Nigla there's Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, written in oral. This is the Torah Shebiksav, Torah Chassidus, the number 5. It's again very precise. This is the Igeres HaKodesh, the 4th segment, which we merited to reach and learn and presently learn. We merited to conclude all the first 3, and Igeres HaKodesh up till this epistle, up till Yud Beis, as we go Bez Hashem, concluding Yud Beis today. So we merited to, which is Likutei Amorim, Sharich V'Emunah, Igeres HaTshuva, and again up till here Igeres HaKodesh, and it's all set up or lined up. That is on the original website, wherever you're watching, but the original website is rather TanyaOnline.com. One word, TanyaOnline.com. We mentioned then also the advantage, or we do mention periodically the advantage of the original website. It's easy to follow, firstly. The text is on a separate scroll bar, but namely, all the classes from the very beginning of Likutei Amorim even is lined up on the left side of the screen. It opens up in the same fashion, easy to follow, and at times we do mention this. We cross-reference in different times where the Alter Rebbe explains a certain idea that we're presently learning elsewhere in elaboration. So of course we just send you there, and it's so easy to find it, really seconds away. Here, it's not far. They get us like we're holding the 12th, beginning of 10th. We had a bit of a presentation, the backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh, which there was a backdrop, and the overall, of course, there's certain Igeres which are not directly related to this backdrop, which we mentioned then, famous Aliyah, Bar Mendel Haradokir, with his Talmidim, Teretz Yisrael. Again, you could look there, the beginning of 10, it's a click away. This is really beginning of 10, not hard to find. So, TanyaOnline.com, the original website, you'll find all the previous classes. Now, similarly, we're talking about tzedakah in Perek Lamed Zayin, the 37th chapter of Tanya. We mentioned this last week or the week before. Learning this chapter of the greatness of the Mitzvah of tzedakah, here, there, the Alter Rebbe so eloquently, so brilliantly, it's hard to say brilliantly, and of course sometimes you naturally say it. You see the brilliance of the Alter Rebbe, Likutei Amorim, and all these segments, all the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, and of course the halacha of the Alter Rebbe, the Sheni Hazav, the golden language, golden writing of the Alter Rebbe in halacha, famous Rav Shulchan, famously known as Rav Shulchan Aruch. Alter Rebbe's writing is very, very unique. He presents in a halacha. There's the same halacha, the way it's presented by the Alter Rebbe is a different appreciation of that very halacha. Again, famous, to go into it now, the famous saying of the Alter Rebbe had a l'sheni hazav, a special way of expressing himself in ways that when he presented his nigla, his chassidus, something very, very unique. And of course, Tanya exemplifies this. So it's not fair to say really the word brilliant when you're talking about Kodesh Kodashim. We don't say Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah, brilliant. There's no, Moshe Rabbeinu was dictated word for word. So with the greatest tzaddikim, when it comes to a letter, of course, is the Alter Rebbe's input. But we never say it so easily because you're talking about Kodesh Kodashim. You're talking about the holy of holy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, represented by the holy of holy, the holiest of holiest tzaddikim, and they wrote the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, the holiest Sfarim of all times. So it's hard to say that terminology, but nonetheless, when you read the Alter Rebbe, the way he made his presentations, it's deep, profound, and of course, very, very unique. So the way the Alter Rebbe presents is Mitzvah tzedakah, basically he's saying that's why you give tzedakah, you're giving of yourself. Again, it's worthwhile it's important to look there. Famously, 37th chapter in Likutei Amorim, the first segment, a click away. So back to the question, you could even, by extension, note that Alter Rebbe's question is not only why is the Pasuk differentiating between Avodas tzedakah and Ma'aseh tzedakah. in essence, every Maisat stock is Avodah. Service, which mitzvah could you say that is demanded so much, one compelling him or herself, like the mitzvah stock? Put up a mezuzah, of course, you go, you buy a mezuzah, costly. Yeah, you get a mahudidiki mezuzah, it's a bit more costly. Okay, so you bend yourself once and you have the mezuzah. It's not only so much bending, you appreciate the mezuzah as the mitzvah, you see you're gaining also spiritually. Your door has a mezuzah. You have a pair of tefillin, or putting on the tefillin. Of course, everything takes effort. But could you compare it if somebody writing a check, in other words, extending themselves with a charitable act? There's no comparison, because this is really taking something of yourself and imparting of something of yourself. Look there, the Alter Rebbe has such a beautiful L'Shein. This is if you invested your energy, which people invest their entire core energy into the money that they're making, and you're giving that away. So of course you're imparting with something of yourself, a nafshistike type of imparting with something it runs very deep within your soul. It's a soul type of extension. And sometimes even someone didn't work to make that money, but at the end of the day you could buy something which would contribute to your well-being, to your well-being. You can take you can take that money and contribute to your well-being, and you're giving it away, you're imparting with that money. It's there's kind of a coercion a bit, not by everybody, not at all times. Sometimes we feel much better to give. It's case by case, person by person. There is such a thing when a person establishes this, which you meant before, he calculates right away. It was the famous chassid of the Alter Rebbe. When he made it very well that day, he kind of predicted the Shadar of the Alter Rebbe is probably just around, just very close, which means Shadar, which is the Alter Rebbe, this existed in all generations. It's called Shluchud Rachmana. They used to go and collect for certain important causes, of Rabbeim, or which was of course associated with Teira Beidig, Mils Chasadim, Pidyon Shvuim, and so on. So they used to go far, near and far. They used to travel, try to collect the funds which were so needed. So when he had a successful week, a successful day in his business, he predicted, without a doubt, the Alter Rebbe's Shadar is nearby, and sure enough, he was always right. Always, but generally he was right. Because he said, Hashem gave me this extra money. Of course, it's because somebody else is in need. And of course, that perspective is also called coercion, but it's a certain establishment, a healthy establishment of one's mind, a perpetuous establishment, or it's establishment which is, a person perpetuously live with, that whatever I have is really there in order for me to extend myself, and Hashem gives me more, I should extend myself more. So the whole idea of tzedakah is always associated with one way or another avodah. So if you go deeper into the Alter Rebbe's question here, it's not only, okay, why does one pasuk Maisat tzedakah and avodah tzedakah? You see, it's different. One brings the result of peace, which is an enormous bracha. You've got to see this peirik to see the shalom. It's not like, oh, shalom, a one-word peace. Peace is nice. No, it's beyond nice. It's tiferes. It's the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a manifestation of the infinite, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You've got to see this chapter in previous classes a click away, in this very Igeris letter, that is. But Avodas Tzedakah brings a total different bracha. Hashkiv Bavetach Hadolam. We spoke about this last week. We gave a little bit of an entry into the final words of this chapter. Tranquility and calm for eternity. I mean, this is something which is a much greater bracha, a greater consequence, a greater result, more than shalom. So what's the difference? So what is it? Maisat tzedakah and avodas tzedakah, but it's deeper than that. In essence, even every maisat tzedakah apparently is avodas tzedakah, because tzedakah by definition is servitude, service, compelling myself, taking something from myself and giving it away. So again, there's a deeper way of understanding the Alter Rebbe's question. But on the surface, what is this? What is these two ideas that Alter Rebbe explains? Maisat tzedakah. Everything is associated with Avodah. The entire Avodah is Hashem. Someone wants to sleep in and he gets up and makes sure to be there in time, minyan, and on time to minyan. Right? There's always that on time to minyan, and answers and follows along and says every word and has a big. Everything is an effort. Everything we do is an effort. Putting on mezuzah is also an effort. Putting on tefillin is an effort, one way or another. There's going to be a strong effort, but it's something you're doing. Everything what a person actively does is an effort, is an investment, one way or another. But there's no comparison to the effort of tzedakah. Yet in the same token, the Alter Rebbe says there's something, we have a head start, basically, encapsulate this, which is Alter Rebbe wrote it, again, I think in the last week, or in the week before, which is again the difference of Maisa and Avaida. We have a head start. Our neshamas are, we have a neshama. A neshama is part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Again, I shouldn't say this, we shouldn't elaborate on this because it's the last class of the class before. Alter Rebbe saying Maisa tzedakah. Of course we have a head start. We have a grand head start. We have a part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu within us. And a Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Alter Rebbe writes in Peri Gimel and Tanya, the neshama which we have is similar to the way it's on high. Nishtalshul mihen, it comes from the high. I'm going to say this very brief and succinctly because we really should go on because it's all we took the time to elaborate in the previous classes why Maisa Hatzdaka is less than Avodas Hatzdaka, because this is something which is one way or another, it's in the DNA of the Yid to give, to be kind, because our neshama has 10 spheres. Nishtalshul mihen, it comes from the spheres of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Hashem has chesed, and Hashem's chesed is bli gvul, infinite chesed. And therefore we have that chesed within us, and therefore it's innate within every single Yid to be gemel chesed, to extend kindness, to be compassion. This is the famous shleisha simanim yesh bo mazu, like it says in the Gemara, 3 signs, 3 identities, the way they identify a Yid exists within this nation. Says the Gemara, two of them is by shanim, by shanim rachmanim geim chasadim. By shanim is a separate idea. It also fits because if you're by shan, you're not so much focused on yourself that much. I mean, the way the positive dimension of baishanut. We're not going to go into it now. Namely, a Yid is by inherently compassionate, inherently geimel chesed, a kind person. So we have a head start. Yeah, in actuality, there's a Maisa. In actuality, there is a extension of oneself, which is always associated with service. But it's still Maisa, meaning to say it's something which is kvarnasa, like the Alter Rebbe writes, that it's something which is familiar, and it's something which is within the system of the Yid, the DNA of the Yid, to give, to be compassionate, to extend himself, and extend himself perhaps a lot. Then there's an idea of Avoida. Avoida is like that. We learned the Lashon of Alter Rebbe last week. You see on top of the page, a person does with great toil, intense toil, against the nature of his soul. And which soul are we talking about? We're talking about even the nefesh alikis. He mevatel tivir etzenu ipnei ratzon, and he compels his nature and his desire for the sake of the supreme desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He. And he speaks about the Torah. There's learning Torah, and there's yigias HaTorah, toil in Torah. There's davening and there's yigiyah davening. You got mitzvah and nefesh. The core of one's soul means that like the soul is squeezed because it's so touched, it's so moved by the experience, which a person has to get there. He has to toil. And so too in tzedakah, there's giving associated with the maisa. This is who we are. And then there's one who compels himself to do beyond the regular. And that we explained a little more in the end of last week's class, a quick way. But here the Alter Rebbe concludes again in the text over here. Avodah is a different idea. He's compelling himself even beyond his nefesh alikis, his godly soul. Now that's saying much, as we explained last week. So let's see it inside. So we'll learn. Let's just go through the text over here, which this is the culmination of the chapter, and he explains what Avodah is and why it brings this unique bracha and what is really behind this unique bracha of Hashkit B'Betach Adayim beyond the Shalim, which is brought through Ma'aseh Tzedakah, Avodah Tzedakah bringing this additional blessing of Hashkit B'Betach Adayim, again, calm, tranquility, certainty for eternity. Tzedakah is Avodah, tzedakah on the level of Avodah, service, which is bending oneself beyond the norm, as explained last week. Because it's so dear and so great, its virtue, and not stam b'ma'id very much. Ma'id. We spoke about it many times. When Torah says ma'id, it's not just a lot, like it says it's beyond explains so many places, and how much more so in Torah Achsidus, with all your heart, with all your soul. All your soul means even you giving up your soul for Hashem. What could be greater than that? No, Ma'idcha is a different idea. Ma'id is infinite, and it depends where, in what context it says, but it's an expression which has like it's an endless in the area, the context where it is noted. For example, in Torah, where it speaks about the Miraglim, it speaks about Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is not just good; it's Torah, it's Ma'oid. But on top of that, when you have Ma'oid, it says in Numbers 5, it's not just double. Like we spoke last week, Nasei Titing, Shaleach Teshal, it's endless. It has a certain endlessness, right? Because it's like a mirror. Nasei Titing, how much should you give? Not twice. I feel Mea Pa'amim, whatever Torah says it twice. Shaleach Teshal, Mea Pa'amim, it doesn't mean 100. We spoke about this last week. I believe in last week's class, it's beyond. Even 100 is just a symbol of, grand number. So, ma'oid, the Alter Rebbe says over here, and again, the Alter Rebbe's words over in general are written with maximum precision. Here, the Alter Rebbe says it's not just dear and great, it's virtue, this avoid, but ma'oid and ma'oid. Why is it so special? Why is it so dear? Because you're annulling, you're subduing your nature, your bodily desire in the face of or for the supreme desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Blessed be He. You're compelling yourself. That causes the complete subduing of the Sitra Achra, of the other side, literally translated, which is the side of Klipa and Tumah, impurity, which is the other side, Zelo Umazev, Kedusha of holiness. So you're subduing. Because we know whatever we do down here, there's a counterpart on high. Our counterpart on high, and all the Olamis really are affected. Everything on high comes from the action of man, speech of man, thought of man. Da malamayla mimoch. Know whatever's going on. Famous Torah of the Magid. Know whatever's going on high is mimoch, is based on your action, your speech, your thought. So whatever we do down here, if we subdue ourselves down here, the enterprise of Klipa Sitra Achra, we spoke so many times, Hashem, this is the point of the Yid down here, to subdue the Sitra Achra, the Klipa, the forces of impurity, which is called Sitra Achra, the other side. The other side of what? The other side of Kedusha. Kedusha is real. Kedusha is associated with godliness, the divine. This is the other side associated with anything which is opposite than Elokus, than godliness, of course, associated with the infrastructure of Tumah, impurity, unholiness, and the point of it all is that we reduce it and we shrink it till the time will come when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will completely obliterate it from this world. Hashem is going to obliterate the spirit of impurity totally from the land, from the entire existence, which again, that's a messianic image. There's no negativity, no impurity, not at all, nor the associated with the individual or collectively. Am Yisrael of the world, gone. Avir min ha'aretz completely. But how does it happen? When we do our share down here, we annul, we subdue the Sitra Achra, the negative side on high. So when we compel ourselves, we go beyond the calling of our Nefesh Elikis, even beyond that. It's about Yigia, it's about Avodah, it's about subduing oneself, his nature, his desire, in this context of tzedakah, as an example, charity, for the sake of the supreme desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, biskafi sitra achra. He bends the sitra achra over here, and the counterpart on high as well. The dearness of Hashem becomes manifest. Now we say in a number of places, the famous Maimer of the Friedrich Rebbe, it's brought many places, but the famous Maimer of the Friedrich Rebbe says Histalik usually could mean, say this very brief, Histalik usually could mean that it's removed. The Histalik Yikar the Kuchbricho, the endearness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means the inner revelations and inner dimensions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is of course the Yakar of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will be Stalik. Stalik means usually removed. We're saying that it comes to expression, it comes to a state of manifestation. So it says in a number of places, and again, famous, the first us of the famous Maimer of the Friedrich Rebbe Basi Lagani, monumental mimer. So he explains there, Istalik means, no, this Yikara the Kuchabricha is associated with Istalik, because there's a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which is Shechina, Shechenes Mislabeshes, the inferior dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke about this myriad of time. There's Shechina and there's Kuchabrichu, right? The Shem Yichud Kuchabrichu Ushchinte. The whole point of Teda Mitzvahs, before I start to daven, I demonstrate this idea. It's about the fusion of Kuchabricha and Shechinte. That's the ultimate purpose. Again, we spoke about this so many times. So there's the inferior dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Malchus, Chol Malchus, Kol Ilam, Shechinte, Shechenet, Mitlabeshet gets involved, and of course that would be the Malay Kol Almin. Spoke about this as well so many times. It's an inferior dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then there's the Kedusha, the Kodesh, Kuchabricha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The way Hashem is Istalik, which means the removed part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is synonymous with the Yikara, the Kuchabrichu, the endeared dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the dimension where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is for himself, by himself, the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Istalik of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that itself comes to a state of expression and manifestation. And this is caused, and this is what it means, Istalik Yikara the Kuchabrichu, the level of Istalik, that comes into a state of revelation, a state of manifestation. So when a person compels himself, and not only he aligns himself with the Maisa tzedakah, but rather he does the Avodah tzedakah, that extra compelling, the subduing himself for the sake of the Ratzon. So then, the deepest parts of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manifesting like the advantage of light when it comes via darkness as it's known, because here there's a battle. When a person overcomes that battle, especially in the area of giving tzedakah, is enormous light, not just regular light, is unleashed. In other words, associated with the Maisa, the light of the Maisa tzedakah. This came through a battle, and a person compels himself, and he gives extra. He gives beyond even the nature of his own godly soul. So then, the Yisun, as explained so many times, it's not just light vis-a-vis darkness, but it's the yisin, the qualitative and quantitative type of light, which is totally different. Mina chesha, from the darkness, from the battle, and from this that a person is able to overcome and subdue himself to that degree, executing stuck in a way of avodah vis-a-vis maisa. At that point, he has the special bracha. At that point, the negative, the evil which exists within the human being cannot at that point re-arouse itself easily on its own. And of course, a person has freedom of choice. A person will arouse it and draw and invite and pull in negativity into a system associated with the opposite of Kedusha and pull it into himself. Of course, nothing could stop a person to do so because the person has freedom of choice, but by default, by nature, this person entered in a different territory. Now, to be clear, you guys see this previous class with Alter Rebbe says this is what Shalom does. Shalom establishes that separation, the good and the bad, the evil and the positive, the dark and the light. You have to see the previous chapters. That's why Shalom has such a great blessing. And that's why Shalom is associated with redemption. Shalom b'mreinu v'yasa shalom aleinu. Pamal yishal maila, pamal yishal mata, the higher plane, the lower plane. And this is, as he says, the experience of davening, when things become crystal clear and the person is able to connect with something which is sublime, transcendent, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the microcosmic idea of redemption. You got to see the previous class, but namely, as he says, what happens after davening? He again mixes in, he comes into Elam Hazah, becomes a total different challenge to have that clarity, that transparency, and that to be able to divide, this is good and this is no good, this is light and this is dark. It can become very tricky and become very complicated. But when he enters into the avodah of tzedakah, the pasuk says, no, now you brought in such a force of kedusha, there is no room for any misunderstandings, situation of gray, camouflaged, which of course is the basis for all the issues one has in life if we think into it individually and collectively. There's nothing like clarity, transparency, at least you know what's good, what's no good, and so on. in your own soul, in society. It is one of the greatest blessing, if you think, because that's the way you can tackle everything. But this is the idea that even after davening, a person should be able to soldier through the day with that sense of conspicuous clarity in everything that he does, and he understands this is good, this is the opposite of good, this is kedusha, this is holiness, this is associated with the divine, with the godly, and as opposed to the opposite. And he's able to have that whole day with that clarity, similar, never like the time of davening. Davening is when a person has that ability to intimately connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, that's an exhilarating, special experience, which there the even evil falls apart. But in this case, the person should be able to have that even after davening. As you remember the end of last week's class, that the problem with the Ma'aseh tzedakah, with the shalom, that after davening, when the person is experiencing real shalom, not necessarily that it can go on so easily after davening, but this causes the total separation, that hashket bavetach, that tranquility, and that it by default is going to be a situation it's not going to come up so fast. Of course, you have freedom of choice to bring it in deliberately, but by the naturally no. And that's the great bracha of hashket bavetach. Tranquility and security for eternity. Hashket miloshen sheket al shmarov. For that matter, hashket has the connotation of calm on its sediments. This is an expression that when one puts away wine, or makes sure that the wine should be ultimately in its pristine state for drinking and so on. So beginning, when the wine is made, there's the sediments, which is always mixed with the wine, and then the talent of making wine. Of course, you bring this you be able to make sure there's a divide between the sediments and the actual wine. And the more you establish that divide, the more the wine is pure, or the best part, the best tasting and the best type of wine is when it's completely separated from its sediments. And again, that's a talent of different wines which are made to do it in a way that the sediments completely remove itself from the liquid, from the wine itself. And that's what sheket al shmarov means. Shmarov nifradim legami min hayayin. The sediments are completely removed from the wine. But from lamata legami, they fall below totally. Vayayin l'maylo zach betzol betachas, and the wine on high is pure, is clear, crystal clear, with the ultimate zachus and tzachus and tzlilus, the ultimate crystal clearness, perfect pristine wine, because the total separation of the sediments from the wine. And this is the bracha that a whole day, not only in the time of davening, which is again the iconic archetype type of experience of shalom and hashket bavetach, but after davening could reoccur again. Got to see the end of the last week's class. The avodah of tzedakah. You bet yourself you're able to subdue your own nefesh habahamis, your own animal soul, and on high you are simultaneous. Again, whatever is happening on high is because of the below, the actions of below. So when you do that special avodah on high, you're really bringing down, seriously bringing down, subduing the sitra achra, the negative energy on high, and what remains is kedusha, what remains is holiness. So what happens is sitra achra. Of course, we have to wait totally when it's totally obliterated. When Mashiach will come, as Hashem says, I will completely obliterate the tumah from the world. But everything comes through our action, our service. We give it a great shot when we do the avodah, in every type of avodah. If it's Torah, tefillah, but how much more so in tzedakah? The pasuk promises avodah tzedakah is going to bring hashket bavetach, tranquility, calm, meaning to say the total separation, to be able to the distinction, the good from the evil. And again, it manifests in so many different ways, because the source of all problems is the gray area, as we all know it. We explained it elaborately in this chapter, in the different classes in this chapter. And that's those hashket, also sheket, also complete removal. That's the sediments, and here's the beautiful wine. So too when a person does tzedakah in that fashion. The sediments would be tantamount to the mixture of evil in his nefesh. You look at the wine before you get very close, and again, the wine connoisseurs and those who are involved in making wine, They'll tell you, they'll look at it, but your eye will only catch, oh, that's clear. It says, no, it's not clear. And they'll bring you closer and they'll open a light or something, some type of bright light, and they'll show you, look how many sediments there are there. It's not pure. It's not in its pristine state. You do more and more until they completely remove all the sediments. And so too, the sediments in the person's soul, this is the negativity, the evil which exists in the person's soul. Is it stark evil? Not necessarily. Sometimes it is. By davening, it's not. That's the blessing of Shalom. But after davening, it can move itself back in, make its way back in one way or another. And sometimes it makes its way beyond the norm, because once it's able to make its way, of course, davening has an impact, an imprint and an impact, and a mark, and it's meant to, for the entire day. Let's explain in all the Sifrei Musar, how much more so in elaboration, Sifrei Chassidus. But nonetheless, it makes its way in one way or another. This is the Taruvus Rasha Benafshe. It is the evil, the mixture of evil of the person's soul. But when you do the Avodas Tzedakah, you have Hashkit, Shekit, Ashmarav, it gets completely removed. And not only in the time of davening, but for the entire day of the person, week of the person, month of the person, life of the person. That is a redemptive type of life. The total obliteration of evil will come, a Mashiach will come, but individually, this is microcosmically, it's a kind of microcosmic Mashiach experience, because it's completely removed. Shekit al shmarav, this is now the purity of the wine, Zach v'tzol betachlis, and the Taruvas Rasha v'nafshe are completely removed. Nivra ma'at ma'at, it's removed little by little, separated, removed little by little, shnifel mata, until it falls away, all the way down to its root and its source, which is all the way in the abyss, figuratively, meaning to say where evil exists. Like as I said, in the depth of the river, all your sins. What is that supposed to be? The depth of the river, all your sins. This is a pasuk in Tanakh, and we repeat it Shoshani Yom Kippur, namely Yom Kippur. This is the Mitzulis Yom, the depth of the river, meaning to say, the source of evil, of course, is below. Physically, of course, the idea that that's where the root is. It's all down below. The problem is it makes its way up and it creeps through the system of the person, the on high. And there's Taruvus Rabbi Nefshalakis Nefshamahamis, and it becomes messy. And therefore becomes so much more strenuous to be able to do what we have to do in our learning Torah and our doing mitzvahs, and maintaining that connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way of inner contentment, in a way with joy and elation, a kind of a geula type of life, which is doable even before we have a grand Mashiach, the macro Mashiach, because we're able to do certain services which somewhat is similar to the experience where Mashiach will come. Imagine the total separation. This is pure, and it exists, and it's all the way down there. It's removed. All your sins. In this case, the Taruvas Rasha Benafshe, the sin energy within your nefesh, and it's totally removed. Whoa, that's a total different bracha. And that's what the pasuk says. The Avodas Tzedakah not only will bring shalom, which doesn't have that ability to perpetuate through the entire day and become the norm in the Yid's life, but beyond that, you'll do the Avodah Tzedakah, Shalom, Hashkit Vavetachad. This brings security, and certainly for eternity, it's true security, true serenity, true calm, which is of course associated with a total division, total separation of anything which is evil, even nuancedly evil, which is really sometimes the greater battle. Creeps through this way, that way of thinking, and no. At the end of the day, it's the same no good. But when it comes through, sometimes in subtle manners, sometimes it's far worse because it's harder to differentiate the good from the evil. And this is the bracha that the entire Taruvas Rasha Benefesh can be completely separated. There's no part of the wine which has any sediment. There's no part of my experience, my nafshis experience, my soul experience, which I soldier my way through my day, through my week, through my life, my month, my life, which has any of this, even taruvas, even a mixture of ra. That is a redemptive type of life. And that's why those few words express and exemplify so much bracha. The greatest bracha is when there's clarity, transparency. And in this case, it's completely separated and removed Sashlich b'mtzulis yom kol chateisav, the idea of hashgate, vavetach ad elam, for eternity.